Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable, our second one of 2024. Lovely to see so many people in the room already. For those who don't know me, my name is Matthew Baird. I've been running this now for nearly 3 years. It's something that was kind of set up in those initial lockdowns, but became really something in 2021. And we've now got this amazing community that just seems to be growing and growing all the time. So it's lovely to see so many of you with us and sharing and talking about what we're doing here. Today's guest is somebody who I think I found through LinkedIn, as so often seems to be the case. And what was amazing actually is that to anybody who noticed when I put up the LinkedIn event, Mike Nicholas is a really good friend of mine, and yeah, he's like, "Oh, I know Heather, she's amazing." So it's really
Oh,
interesting to see
really?
how.
Oh, no, I didn't know we had him as a common friend. Wow.
Yeah, Mike and Emma I've been friends with for many years, so lovely to kind of have the friend recommendation as well there. But you and I were talking before Christmas. There are a number of different topics we could have talked about today. I think that could have come through, but hoarding is one that hasn't come to the round table before, and is one that has kind of been mentioned, I think, as part of like wider mental health conversations or something to that effect, but was one that I was really excited to bring to the table. And judging by the numbers of people who immediately jumped on as attendees, I'm certainly not alone. So without further ado, Heather, I'm going to pass across to yourself to introduce
Right.
yourself, introduce obviously Cloud's End, and talk about what we'll be discussing today. To anyone who's going to join in the chat, please feel free to put any questions you've got during the presentation in the chat function. I'll bring them in, and then after the presentation will be more wider Q&A. So I'll pass over to Heather to kick us off.
Thank you. Shall I reshare again? Because my
Please
thing
do. Yes, thank you very
is
much.
so while I'm introducing myself, then I'll just share what I'm going to show you as well. So I hope you can all see that now. Um, so my name's Heather Matuozzo, and I started Clouds NCIC, that was the UK's first social enterprise to work with people who hoard. And I worked with somebody in Sandwell and successfully. And so when I first started, and Sandwell Homes said to me, "Oh, what did you do?" Training course. And so I was like, "Oh, never done any training before, but I'll give it a go." This was a long time ago. This is like over 15 years ago. But that was the first hoarding awareness course as well. And so it's grown from there, and the creation of Cloud's End was born from that, because I'd suddenly, from being working in decluttering, but also always having had a love of psychology, then I could see that there was this enormous need, and that I'd looked for somebody to go and work with, and couldn't find anybody, which is why I set Cloud's End up, and I was quite shocked that in the 21st century there was nothing. Yet there was such a big need, because I'd done research. I'd phoned round local authorities, not just in Birmingham. So I live in Solihull, so Birmingham is my biggest council. So today, and I know I've only got 20 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast and make it as succinct as possible, which isn't my forte because I can talk forever. We're going to have a look at what we're doing in Birmingham. So I'd been hanging in there for 10 years, training up and down the country, because nobody had a hoarding budget, but everybody had a training budget, and there was a need for hoarding awareness training. And so when finally in 2019 Birmingham Council came to me after much like doing this, "Hi, I'm here," they said, "We finally got some funding to do a project, a hoarding project, a decent hoarding project. Would you like to apply for?" And it's like, "Oh, I really have to think about that for longer than about a split second." So this is how it came about. I thought you'd like to see what we'd done, and how we're sort of making it work in a multi-agency sense. But obviously housing is a big part of that. So the project's called Chaos to Order. I'm going to show you what I promised I did and what actually happened. And now the second phase of the project that we're in. And then just a quick whiz bang of understanding. If you understand hoarding, you can work with it, and that's the problem. Because everybody thinks they understand what is the problem, and they don't. They just respond and react to it, which is nobody's fault. It's just that you need to have that extra bit of insight to be able to help properly. So that's my logo, because it is a bit like that. Those little puzzles that you get in crackers where you've only got that little square to move in. Very often you've got, and this isn't just physically, it's also mentally. You've just got one little bit that you can move around in, because as people's homes are full, so are their heads. It's a mental health issue. It is official. When I started, everybody told me it was a made-up condition, which was quite difficult, seeing as I knew it wasn't. I had family members that hoarded, but I didn't grow up in a hoarded home. And it was recognised by the World Health Organization in 2018 to be included from 2021 onwards. It affects 2 to 5% of the population. This is an extrapolated percentage that everybody uses. It came from America. I think this has gone up because I've definitely seen an increase since the pandemic. Not a choice. It's not laziness. It's not a problem, but it's a solution to somebody's problem, and it could happen to you, because you never know at which point in life things might start to fall apart and you wouldn't know, which is why most of your tenants don't know and will defend their position. So the Chaos to Order project aimed to look, for the first 2 years, I said, well, I'll try and work with 100 people over 2 years. Then that got doubled because we couldn't do a different type of project because it was still in COVID. So we could repeat what we did. So I've got 4 years of data to work on, which is great. It was based on education, because what I just said earlier, if you understand hoarding, you've got a chance of being able to work with people successfully and not have a nervous breakdown yourself. So I wanted it to be very education based in a multi-agency way. So I do training sessions across the city, and then encouraging those multi-agency networking. Then we've got all these things grew with the project. When you put your flagpole down, people come to you. So I asked if I could have one social work student. That's grown into 2 cohorts of 6, so I get 12 a year now. And those students do 6 months placement, but that means they'll leave with a specialism. They'll come back into, there is no reason why we couldn't do placements for housing officers who are joining the job, for occupational therapists, and for psychologists as well. And Birmingham Council said a weird thing, which councils don't normally say. They said, we are looking at grassroots organisation to deliver these projects. It's funded by Adult Social Care. But they said, we want innovation and creativity, which you don't very often hear said by a council. So I was like, this is amazing. And then I said to them, I will need some individual funds, which I can't tell you what they'll be for yet, but they'll be for skip provision, cleaning, clearing, counselling, whatever that person tells me is their need. If I can cover some of it with a small amount of funding, that's the only bit I can't be specific about in my application bid. And they were great. So they gave me a small amount of funding per head. But this is what I promised. I'll promise to train 400 to 600 staff over 2 years. I'll work with 100 people who have hoarding issues. And not everybody has the same needs. So they're not all like the intense hoarders that are shown on the television. But it will reduce evictions and child removal. Well, hopefully avoid them totally. But also you'll have people living in the city that feel that they're being listened to and they're being supported. And then people that have come through the project are invited to become ambassadors. So they're people that have had help, it's made a difference to them, and they're happy to talk about that difference and why it worked. There'll be a lot of training materials for use eventually. I've created something called the Hoarding Charter as well, which the city is still, I've still yet to have the party where the city signs up to it and there's a big fanfare. Things keep happening, you know, like the Commonwealth Games and then bankruptcy, but we will overcome and we will have the party and there will be a big signing of the Hoarding Charter. And that charter will mean that anyone living in Birmingham who has hoarding issues will be heard and understood, because the city itself is declaring that it will look after it in the right way. And then these are the outcomes that actually the data that I said I've got. So I actually trained over 1,700 people. We actually worked with and took referrals for 516 people. But these were the surprising things that I didn't realize would happen. We actually did 179 managed clearances. Now, when I say managed, that means that the person has agreed to it, they're part of it, and it's been successful. It hasn't been forced. It hasn't been done under threat or duress. It's been done with the person themselves. I've also delivered 100, well, not personally, heaven help me if I did, 190 skips. Some of those were repeated. Some people had more than one, but always by their own request. And if they say they wanted to skip, I will also say, are you ready to fill it? Would you need some help to fill it? Do you need time? All things like that. And then 390 face-to-face visits, that's me going to do assessments and visits with people, and going back to see, to sort of invite them to become ambassadors and getting video footage. And then 12 citizens were helped in COVID on the phone because they said that would be useful to them. But we are starting to, Birmingham's a big city, so we're starting to embed this sense of teamwork, which is what's needed, which we call, in Clouds End, we call it supportive intervention. And we've got citizens who feel supported and understood. And then from October last year, the budget changed shape because I really wanted to put it back into the city so that it's part of the infrastructure of the city, not an external just referral project, which I never wanted it to be anyway. And so I'm working with what's called the neighbourhood network schemes. The city is divided into 10 sections. Each of those sections is funded through adult social care to know what the assets are in that area, i.e. who runs the food banks, who runs the rambling sessions, who runs the storytelling, who runs the knit and natters. All those are kept in a directory, and the neighbourhood network scheme has got individual agencies that run. There are some, I think, Accord Housing run one in one part of the city, and they are aimed at getting people back connected to their community. So I've now got these 2 new coordinators who've just started. They will do what I was doing. We will take all the referrals, but they will then go and do the visits. They'll find out what's needed, but they will also know what's going on in their side of the city and what other things we might be able to connect people back to. We're also now able to add volunteers, which I've never been able to manage because I didn't have the time. So that's exciting, and I'm really looking forward to, getting that new project working. It's took a bit longer but things always do. So I'm not going to go through this because I haven't got time. I said that you need to understand why people hoard to be able to help them. And so it can be genetic, but it's nearly always caused by trauma. So the understanding of how trauma affects people's brains and their physicality will give you a good idea as to why talking practical stuff or even threatening stuff just doesn't hit the ground. It either re-traumatizes people or they just can't handle it. Their brains can't handle it. And so you need to understand that. And also, this could be caused by neurodiversity. So I call it organizational dyslexia to be able to remember it easier. But neurodiversity can also make people's thinking and organizational skills completely different. And so therefore, it looks like what I said earlier. It looks like laziness. It looks like people can't be bothered, or it looks like people are purposefully ignoring what you're asking them to do. But honestly, they're not. They just need understanding. I've just put this in because hopefully everybody's seen this by now. We've got this in our referral form, simply to see the levels. It doesn't tell you the whole picture, but it gives you an idea of what levels you're looking at. My funding can clear 1 or 2 rooms that are at the level of 5 or 6. But if the whole house is a 9, then I have to bring in extra external environmental services and people to do that work, because my funding would be wasted. It wouldn't touch the sides really. But mostly we get people that are sort of between 4 and 7, I would say, is the average. What you're looking for It's understanding yourself as well, because I said earlier, you will react to people and you don't know you're doing it. And I'll tell you this, this is a little nugget, if you like. This is the other side of understanding hoarding, is understanding your reaction to it. No matter how professional you are, you will always have a reaction when you walk into those left-hand side rooms, because this is our ancient protective brain, our primal brain that needs to keep us safe and looks for danger. And the left-hand rooms are dangerous. You can't escape from those rooms if a saber-toothed tiger happens jumping through the window, or that's why it makes you feel unsafe. But you're not aware of that. And that might change how you talk to people, how you'll go, oh my God, this has got to be sorted. We've got to solve it. We've got to refurb. We've got to whatever. And that's why when you do see before and afters, you do go, oh, because it's a relief. You feel safe looking at the pictures on the right hand side, and you feel unsafe looking at the ones on the left. Now, if you marry that with the unsafety or the lack of safety your tenants feel, that's why things don't work. It's fire with fire, if you like. And so, that's where the understanding comes in. And then an after. So if you're at all able to continue those visits after you've helped somebody, just to make sure that they're maintaining, just to give them space to talk about fear of relapse. And the reason why people relapse is because people go in, often do an enforced clear, which is a re-trauma. And then if to soothe the trauma people hoard, they'll just hoard again, only quicker. So it's being able to sort of build that in. If you can, it will pay. So supportive intervention is creating a team. So it shouldn't just be housing that deals with this. It should be everybody: social care, mental health, fire service, and yourselves, and other charities or people that might be able to help. But also the tenant. The tenant has to be a team member, or the team doesn't work, because there's imbalances. So having a team that is then like a wall going, you need to do this, we can do that, it still doesn't feel supportive. And everybody in that team needs to have an open, solution-focused mindset, not needing to punish, not needing to say, well, it's not my job to do this. So it needs that collaboration. And then look at the before and after of a person. I know those pictures are great and the room makes you go, oh, because it makes you relieved. But actually what you want is somebody that's been helped mentally to change their mindsets so that they can understand themselves. So when you think about looking at what to do for somebody, how would that person be different? Talk to them about that. How would they feel about your visits if they didn't hoard? What conversations would you have if that wasn't there? And then how would they talk about their experience of being supported by yourself? And that's your guide to how you move forward, rather than going, well, I have to do this. This is my job. I have to do an injunction. I have to do, try and swap it round, and you will get much, much better results, and you'll just feel happier. You're looking at something is a successful subconscious coping strategy. So of course, if you take that away, it's going to harm. And it's been practiced over years, so it's a habit. People are not aware they're doing it. And that's what I said at the beginning. If we started this behavior, neither would we be. It's then people who've tried and failed in the past, family members, friends, other housing officers, will always end in tears because of this clash of lack of safety from both sides. And then there's standoffs, and then there's mistrust, and then there's resentment. And of course, that's not conducive to supportive work. So the key is understand the disorder, find the right partners. It's going to take time. It should take time to be successful. Build that in. Don't try and force it into 6 weeks. And don't make it personal. It's not your journey. You're facilitating somebody to make it. It's really hard to say that. I mean, I say it and I do it all the time. And I try to bring myself back to remembering this isn't my house. And, and so I try and, because I'm also trying not to get burnout. If you personalize it too much, like oh, we were going so well, and now you've let me down because you haven't, you know, that's what I mean by personalizing. Remind yourself that you're just facilitating, and encourage people to work at their own pace. We're going to, you know, be working alongside them to do this, creating these new strategies, new habits that give them that hit of dopamine that shopping normally gives them, and set small, really small, doable tasks. Don't go 12 bags by next week. Go, do you think you could manage a carrier bag? Or even just I don't know, pile of magazines, or 5. I'm happy, anything, one thing, because you want them to succeed. If they succeed, that's a hit. That's a hit of feeling good, and they want more. And then encourage them to self-praise. Encourage them to notice what they have done, not what they haven't done. And then ask questions, nice questions, not loaded questions. Testing and reinforcing these little tasks, patience and understanding, and tolerance. Sometimes you might have to put up with, you know, cancelled appointments, and it's just part of the weave of what you're doing. And then encourage your client to talk about how they feel, you know, what would work for them, and curiosity. You be curious about all sorts of stuff and encourage them to be curious about themselves. So, in short, conversations, curiosity, creativity in some crazy ideas you might have that might work for them, and perseverance. And how housing can be involved is you've got to identify those needs that I've put above. Who are the agencies that you want to invite to come and work alongside you, and then learn what they do and tell them what you can do, so that each of you's got your tasks lined up. So you're not going, well, social services, you should have this. If they can't do it, it's just hot potatoing, you know. Have you got a hoarding policy in your area or for your housing association? If you have, then have a look at it. It's probably far too long and too difficult to understand. So try and make it a 10-point plan. And organise hoarding days and invite people along. They're nearly always oversubscribed. And supportive intervention works when you do this. You support people and find out. If nothing else, could we facilitate a support group? I've got an online support group now and a WhatsApp support group, and they are great. But you'll need a partner that will run those for you. But you can get funding to run support groups because they aren't expensive. Or could you do drop-ins at, do you have like a community hub that you could just do chats and drop-ins where somebody could just have a gentle chat, where people feel that they're going to be listened to, not told off? Done it. I don't know if I went over time because I wasn't watching the clock, but just one thing, try and make it fun. This is a really serious thing, but if you're fun to be with, then people will want you to be there, and then you'll enjoy it more as well. So what's not to like?
Heather, you're brilliant. And I know when we were talking before, like this is sometimes like, you know, a half day or even a full day course that you cover
Yes,
all
it
of
is.
this and going down to smash through that in about 25 minutes is amazing. So thank you so much. And obviously I hope people reach out to help@cloudsend.org.uk to come and reach out. I'm going to close your sharing because there's been a question already in the chat, and I'd love people who would like to raise a hand, come in with queries and things like that. First question that came in, I had a couple as well for my own, but came from Sophie Hayward. I work in supported housing and therefore work with people with various forms of challenging behaviour, and hoarding can be a result of their learning disability. What techniques have you used when working with someone who is vulnerable in this sense, or who may not have capacity? And what techniques do you find helpful from preventing hoarding happening again?
That's interesting. Funnily enough, the only project I ever got funded when I very first started, because I started in 2009, which was a brilliant time not to start anything that might be funded, because all the funding left the building. I think somebody told me 4 million quid left his budget one morning when I went to say hi, you know. But I did a project called the Declutter Bus, which I did with people with learning difficulties. And to be honest, it was such a lovely project. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't do anything different with them than I do with people who don't have learning disabilities, apart from listening to them as a person. So I went shopping with some of them to try. I'd say, you know, can I come to the shops with you? You can talk me through why you buy 3 of the same DVD, you know, brackets. That's what I want to I wanted to see what's going on when he does that, because he couldn't tell me without being there, and just things like that. And so it's exactly the same. Just get people talking, ask them what, if they recognize that when you take stuff away, it's making them feel panicky. And then say, is there anything else that you could do that doesn't make you feel panicky? And could we do swap? Could we look at it in a different way? Like a lot of the people that were on the autistic spectrum, they liked making lists. So we made lists of what they had. So they went, oh, I've got those. I've got quite a few. Oh, okay. So it was just, I just like honed in on what was their biggest fear. And I used to take things away and then bring them back to see how they felt about, but I do that with other clients as well. Like take something away and then always bring it back. But then I'd say, I never mentioned it. If they never mentioned it, that was fine. But one of the guys, he did meet me at the door and went, I want those DVDs back now. And I went, fine, here they are. They're in the car. But I just did these things to help people to understand that their emotions are often tricking them and that they can find new emotions. So that's what if you want a copy of the Declutter Bus project video, which I made with all the people that agreed to be on the video, they knew that it was going to be shared to be shown to other people, then let me know and I'll let you have it. And you could maybe show them that and say, what do you think about that? Could we do a project within our supported housing group? So yes, just email me and I'll send you a link to it.
That's amazing. Thank you. One of the questions I had, there was a question just popped up in the chat, like a couple of things I popped up, and one is actually related to what Sharon's point, so I'll ask my other one first. You mentioned there about a support group and setting up support groups and reaching out and those kind of things. Now, I get it, and this isn't being, but evidently things like this, the round table, the exempt accommodation forum, others, it's that persistence and continuing to kind of, when you first set up a support group, don't expect 20 people. You might get 1 or 2 a week and it will organically grow. How have you found that when working with partners who maybe have tried to set up something similar before and you get that immediate pushback with tried it before, doesn't work? How do you work with those partners to maybe, I don't know, exemplify and grow those support groups? Because it's absolutely imperative we do it. But every time I hear of businesses setting up support groups, it's only successful if you've got someone behind it who really, really believes in it and keeps pushing the narrative.
Yeah, it is. You need to find somebody that has a little bit of extra skin in the game, if you like. So I set my first support group up with no money. I just set it up because I knew that I would learn from it. So that's what sort of gave me the impetus. And then Birmingham Council asked me to set up 4 more. And I went, no, that'd kill me, but I'll do 2 more. So then I did 3, but then COVID happened. So I put them all online. So it's identify the right partners. And I did see something come up that just said, where do you get funding? I'm just trying to remember, there is one body, it's community something. You'll have to get in touch with me and I'll find it. They will fund some support groups locally, but they've got like rules. I think you have to have 3 directors and you probably need to find a charity or a CIC that would agree to run it. So mental health charities might agree to run them, or even somebody who's had hoarding issues. So if you've ever worked with anybody successfully, or even partly successfully, you could ask them if they would work with you. And because they say, don't they, if you want to learn something, teach it. So support groups are just open. They're just a place where people can come and talk safely. And then find comfort in other people talking about the same thing. That's really what our support group does. And then the WhatsApp group have taken on a life of its own, where they post challenges within it, to each other. I'm going to do 10 of this today. And they did an advent calendar challenge where they, did, but this was nothing to do with me. This is when things take a life of their own. And it was just great. So, but yes, I'm trying to remember what it's community something, I think, that funds.
Find out and we'll share it round. And it's things like that. They're absolutely grand, because I think so often you know, there's so much stigma and things that go with it. And I'm really glad you brought up those points earlier. I'm going, actually, this isn't just a laziness thing. This is related to mental health, but there is support available. I'm going to go to some of the questions in the chat. As I say, if anyone else would like to dive in, please feel free to raise hand. It'd be great to hear from you. Question from Sharon Morris. Thanks, Heather. Really good session. Have you come across professionals advising it being hoarding as a lifestyle choice? If so, what's been the response from either yourself or from the wider group?
I have to make a face if somebody says a lifestyle choice, because it's a lifestyle choice is a bit like the sound of a heavy door shutting in a prison, because it means people will they won't help that person. So
Yeah.
lifestyle choice is rubbish. It isn't a choice. It isn't a choice. Nobody, if you took anybody who hoards back to when they were 6 years old and said, did you dream about living in a rat infested house that had no electricity or running water, where you couldn't, even take care of yourself properly? Was that your dream? I don't think so. That's a choice. Lifestyle choice has been given when people don't understand what they're seeing and can't find a way forward. They'll find a label, and that's what lifestyle choice is. So it's not a lifestyle choice. It's actually a cry for help, that stuff in that house. It's a language. And it's not that's why I said it's not a choice and it's not laziness. It's somebody that is stuck inside some thinking that originally was there to keep them safe, but because it was misinterpreted, simplifying it, it's ended up like this. And any attempt to dissemble that behavior will just flip somebody back into feeling massively anxious and frightened. But no, it's not a lifestyle choice, honestly.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Heather. For me, the pictures pictures you put up on the screen to 3, then that's lifestyle. Yeah, we all have a bit of a messy room.
Nobody's perfect. I've got loads of stuff in my house.
But the minute you start seeing from 5, 4, 5 upwards, then you're looking at, there's mental health, there's definitely some issues there. And that has always been my response when somebody says it's a lifestyle choice. So
that's just a closed door, because then nobody will get any help.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, Sharon. Chloe had asked where you access funding for support groups. So I hope, Chloe, that some of that's helped, but definitely reach out to Heather.
I'll dig it out. I've got it written down somewhere. I'll find it for you. I just haven't got it in my, because I'm not funded for my support groups. That's why I can't remember. I just do them because they, like I said, they're my university, if you like. I learn from my support groups. So
I completely agree. It's why the roundtables run. I learned, like, people say to me, like, how do you know X, Y, Z? I'm like, well, I run this every week. Like,
exactly.
That is beautiful. And Rebecca Sutton said, can you share your email, which we'll make sure we get round as well. I'll make sure that gets round to everybody who's attended. Question from Lucy Sillaby. So, hi, I'm an EHO in local authority and did my master's dissertation on hoarding last year with a content analysis of all of England's local authority multi-agency hoarding policies, looking at how outdated the information within them is, and the results aren't great. I also undertook local authority hoarding training last year, but again, wasn't keeping up with research. Do you think there's a way to collaborate to try and tackle this issue? Because evidently these things move forward so quickly, actually, when you do research. And by the sound of it, Lucy's found the same, that you just keep spinning the wheels going, well, actually, you're wrong. But people are going, well, no, this is what we know.
I'd love to see that research. If you could share it with me, that would be really interesting. And the only way that really certainly what my training aims to do, is to help people to change mindset. And when you change so this is both those who hoard, but also those who work with them. Because that's why I keep going on about, if you understand it in your heart, then you really you'll find a solution. Because your curiosity will be hunting for a solution. Whereas if you are like, oh, got another hoarder and they're just going to take up all my time and I know exactly how it's going to work, then your biases are overtaking your capacity to help. And so I understand it, but that's what needs to be overcome. It's inviting people to feel what I feel, otherwise I wouldn't do this job. When when it works, it is just the most lovely place to be. When like, I phoned somebody last week who I was dreading phoning. She's a lady that's has managed to like remove all friends from her life because she lost a child, and then her husband died, and she was an only child, and she's got no family. And so she's got 2 hoarded homes, but she'd ended up in hospital and then in a nursing home. And so I'd spoken to her, and I always try and talk her down and then up, sort of down as in this is all disgusting, and all the anger, and then up with a little bit of. So I phoned her because I'd spoken to her before Christmas, and she was like, well, it's never gonna happen. This is that. They'd started working on a house because she'd agreed to sell it. She'd sold it, but it needed clearing. Anyway, long and short, she was like, yeah, it's nearly done. And I'm like, what? And she said, yeah. And one of the clearance guys I work with, who are ex-firefighters, and they're just fab, was taking her to the other house she has to see if they can use that for a bit of last minute storage before, and it was like, this is and I just said to her, you have made my day, because she had, even me, and I'm fairly upbeat and optimistic, I was thinking, oh gosh, this is another few months of, let's keep
sometimes
going.
what it takes is just that realization and somebody actually talking to you like this is an okay thing. And I've known people who hoard, and sometimes it's just talking to someone without stigma, judgment, going, no, you're right. Like, if you're not happy with this, cool, well, what can we do? And it just normalizing it. And I think that's so often what we find with so many things that come up within the housing sector. And certainly I've worked with some customer service managers or directors of customer service who tell me that, like, the work they do with their customer service team so often is around stigma, because they're under so much pressure. They start to just go, oh, it's this, oh, they're just hoarding. I thought, well, it's never just hoarding. There's an underlying issue, and if we can get to work out what's going on, hoarding is the result. It's that symptom and cause thing, isn't it? There's a point in the chat there from Lucy Ryan. Hi, Heather. I work in housing as a tenancy sustainment officer and really struggle to get support from and with ASC and mental health teams in trying to work with residents for successful outcomes. It's frustrating for me as a professional to get other agencies to support residents positively, so I dread to think how this reflects negatively on residents. How do you get other agencies to see hoarding as something that can be reduced or helped, rather than, I guess, something that is just stigmatized?
Well, I think the only way you can do that really is examples. So if you have case studies of when something has worked. So one of the things that I found that is a problem between these different agencies, what I said earlier, that very often people involved, fire service, social services, mental health, who are, probably the most elusive, but not for any bad reason. It's just that they're underfunded and understaffed, but so is social care. Nobody knows what they do. Nobody understands what a housing officer's job is, or a social worker, or even a firefighter. And this is where that, well, it's not my job, gets passed on. So I think if you can sort of have a day where you invite people, or an hour's Zoom, Zoom has made, or Teams has made this so much easier to do, and say, could we have a chat about how we deal with hoarding cases? Because they're on the up. And so there's even more interest now in finding solutions. And then when you have that meeting, have an agenda and say, we are looking for solution-focused approaches to dealing with this. And so what could you social services help us with? And what could we could help, we as housing, we could help some of the caretakers in some of our properties. They could take away extra stuff, things like that, so that people know what's on offer within that group. And then when the group work together, then the end result is a happy tenant, and then get the tenants to be, as I said, part of their own solution. They've got to be part of it. They've got to commit to being, to trusting the help that's being offered them, and to giving you clues as to how to help them, and then getting them to talk about what worked for them. So that's what I do. I'll go around and say, why did this help you when you've been offered skips before? And they said, oh, we haven't been offered skips before, or we've been given a skip and told we've got to fill it over the weekend. And so we couldn't do that because I was ill, or, you know. But when I've said, if you want to skip, when would you be ready for it? In about 3 weeks. Great. Okay. That was the difference. So they just talk about what the difference was. So I would encourage doing that. Just if you can just find one case that might have had some success, or that you want to have success with, and say, join me, and perhaps get a meeting together where you all talk first.
I think what's
So
amazing, and I agree with you about this post-pandemic thing, is actually, firstly, you do need someone who is willing to be accountable and to take a lead on it. You always do. But actually, I mean, just look at today, we've had 50 people come along for a conversation on hoarding. If we go back 3-4 years before pandemic, we wouldn't have got this because we didn't have the facilities to do it. Whereas now you can say to someone, look, I just need an hour in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
We'll get 2 or 3 partners around the table and go, right, we can do this, we can do this. But who, if you're going to join it, you're here to do something. You're not just here to kind of listen and then pass the buck again. Because I agree, that's where, unfortunately, so many problems go wrong in housing, is a lack of accountability. And it's something we see time and time again. But Heather, I think the training and the advice and the guidance, sometimes it's just getting people to realize the numbers and the volume which you're doing, and getting that voice loud to go, right, well, collaboratively we need to do something. My worry will always be that there won't be a big swing or in the agenda until we get suddenly a horror case somewhere and people realize it's hoarding that's caused it, and then evidently then everyone suddenly jumps on it. But hopefully we won't get to that kind of level.
That very often happens. Yeah, I'm often invited to do some training on the back of a death, because the coroner has said, what was everybody doing in this case? And everybody's gone, well, not quite sure. And so there is a distinct difference when you just go, we're going to have a chat about how we can take a positive slant on this, not a negative one. And suddenly everybody goes, oh, that feels really nice. How can we support each other? How can housing support social services? How can social services support mental health?
And then when those teams properly start working together across the board, big change comes. And where there's lots of stuff in the chat, so I'm going to bring some questions to you. So Lisa, hi, great discussion. Well, I understand housing's role in these cases. We struggle to get that's just the one I just read, wasn't it? No, we struggle to get services to support vulnerable adults as a recognized mental health issue. Well, some ideas are great. We're not able to support those to some extent, and it's beyond our role or expertise. Advice on why this does not seem to be taken seriously by mental health services would be great.
I think that, I mean, I'm not, like I said, I try to be optimistic about most things, but I think the issue with mental health is, no matter what level of mental health learning and training you've done, though you can be a PhD student, but unless you've taken a specialist unit in hoarding disorder, you won't understand it. Because even doing a degree in psychology or psychology and therapy, or it isn't in any degree, even mental health first aid. They talk about obsessive compulsive disorder, but they don't mention hoarding disorder. And so right from the top down, you have this lack of understanding unless somebody's done a specialism in hoarding. And this is and then mental health don't have a box for it. So it's not covered. So if it's not depression or, or a recognized common mental health, but normally you can get away with those tick boxes because comorbidities with hoarding are on that list. But that is the real reason why. But the good news, well, it'll take a while to filter down. But for me, the good news is I managed to get a PhD student who works with me at Birmingham Uni, and he is looking at creating a therapy that works and can be used by non-therapists. And that therapy is going to be created by the people on my project. So it's coming from the mouth of the people it's helping. And so then it will work, if you know what I mean. Because he's done some research into all the therapies that have been used, and they all work to an extent. But the theory is that those therapies work simply because somebody was talking to someone and listening to them. And so that will be the basis of the therapy he develops.
And I guess we're still finding that thing of people not seeing hoarding as a symptom of something else. They're just not realizing that those connections aren't being made. It's almost like hoarding is the mental health disorder. So, well, it's often because of something else. And as you put, and I loved it in your presentation, it's a solution to a problem. It's not a problem itself. And I think so often that's the mindset shift we need to see.
We react to the problem that we are perceiving, which is the stuff. And that's why I said, you know, all humans will do that. We are made to do that. We have to override that in ourselves. And so that's why historically it's always been a practical approach to the stuff. And of course, you're just taking away somebody's medicine, if you like, you know. And so, but it's nobody's fault. This I'm not a blamer, because you have to have specialist knowledge to understand that. But you only get those people that are curious. So people that have done trauma-informed training, they will understand hoarding, because the trauma response is why it isn't just hoarding that is caused by that. It's lots of other mental health issues and social issues, such as drug addiction and substance misuse and alcohol addiction. You know, all of those will come from a triggered trauma response, or not all of them, but very often they will. And so it's just that lack of understanding. Trauma response has only just been adopted, or trauma informed responses have only just been adopted by the National Health Service.
Yeah.
You know, so it's everything will filter down, but everything takes time.
Well, we're going into the last 10 minutes, and there's still plenty of stuff coming through in the chat, which is wonderful. Thank you, everybody. So, Karen Hawkins, this is great, Heather, and music to my ears. Thank you so much. Can I just ask what your response has been from the mental health services themselves? Have you successfully found counselling or clinical support to help with people's mental health when hoarding? I guess, and it goes back to what you've just mentioned there, it's still being a relatively new diagnosis.
As I said, mental health are the most elusive of the
because they're so underfunded.
but that's what I mean. It's not just that they're underfunded; they're under educated as well. No matter who, psychiatrists, they won't know what to do with hoarding, and there isn't a pill. So you know, there isn't a hoarding pill. So even they will struggle. And yeah, I think that's it would be lovely to start doing some work with mental health. I've just joined a big like mental health forum in Birmingham, which hopefully, you know, we can start doing a little bit there. But it is within my multi-agency groups. There's no mental health. I haven't accessed any therapy other than talking to people on the phone. I haven't accessed any therapy that works alongside me, sadly.
Which is a real concern. And I say this is where I'm wary that it's going to take one of those big news stories that goes bang in a paper or a national headline for this to be taken, unfortunately, as seriously as it potentially needs to be. A question from Mike Scarisbrook from Turning Point. Other than empathy, compassion, persistence, perseverance, and a sense of humour, what else have you found to be a key to successful engagement?
This sounds like what have the Romans ever done for us? To me, if I answer this, I'm hesitating because it sounds really trite. But I just think, just being you, just be a chatty human, and that's the best way to, and not a solver. So a chatty human that just wants to get to know somebody, that I would say is my best. And I always do it with a humorous slant. And I mean, I did used to have one lady that was on my support group who just went, no, I haven't got a sense of humor. No, nothing. No, you'll never make me laugh, you know, which used to make me laugh even more. But yes, that's it. Be a chatty human. There's a poster that I found that my daughter actually made a picture of it for me for Christmas once, and it was humankind, be both.
Do you think you need to be a particular kind of person, not just from a housing officer? You know, there's a lot of discussion that goes on in terms of specialisms in housing officers and support workers. You know, do we do generic? Do we do pure income, pure ASB, whatever that might be? Do you think there's a case to be made for, with stuff like hoarding, that you need specialists in your team from a mental health side to be able to go out and because if you're a generic housing officer, the amount that people are being asked to learn and know and develop all the time, to go out and deal with something like hoarding, as you say, it's such a specialist piece of knowledge. It must be a real challenge when housing officers are unfortunately already stretched.
Well, I think when I do training, I say to people, if you really hate this, if you really hate every time you visit a hoarded home, then let people know, because that won't get better. It'll get worse. And so you will put it off. You will become like them. There are some people that just can't stomach actually going into some hoarded homes because they are a bit pongy and a bit, they're just too much. But then on the other side, the flip side of that is there's nearly, like when I used to do face-to-face training, there were, and even now, because I still stay in the room, if you like, on Zoom, there's always 2 or 3 people that will stay behind, that will go, oh, I wish I did what you did. And those are the people that you want to encourage in your organization, the people that have got just that extra bit of curiosity, that really want to do this job, that absolutely love it, that don't really mind if it's a bit pongy. They're the ones that you want to encourage and support, because they'll do what other people. I mean, once I did some training and I explained this to the person, and she went, no, everybody's got to do it. Everybody's got to. They've got, all my housing officers have got to do this. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you won't get good results out of anybody then, because you won't be able to give more support. So if you've got somebody that's doing this and they go, I need longer. I'm really making inroads with Mrs. Smith, but I need longer. And you have an understanding manager that goes, I trust that person. And they just go, yeah, that's fine. That's good news to hear that's fine. Whereas if you've got somebody that goes, no, we've got 2 years and that's it. And if no results have happened, then we're going straight for legal. That's not conducive to flexibility. And, I always try and make comparisons between hoarding and physical ill health. You wouldn't expect your tenant to recover from cancer in 6 weeks. And maybe they might relapse and they have it again and they're ill again. And so if you can think about it in that sort of way, the compassion you would have for somebody there, then try and make that the way you think about how you're going to work with people who hoard.
We're down to the last 5 minutes. I love the analogy, and I think that's exactly the way people need to. It's that mind shift, but also I think it's very much what you said there. There are people who will be absolutely fine with this, and others who will really struggle from a, if say I was a housing officer who really struggled to go into a place with hoarding. Why keep putting me in that situation? Because if your face shows straight off the bat, you're going to be, then they'll know, and then everything it's going to struggle to recover. There's a question from Joan. Thank you, Heather. Really interesting. I work with non-native English speakers with very little language skills. Can you tell me how you could work with them, especially given an understanding about hoarding? Hoarding can be understood from an English perspective. What about other cultures?
Other cultures do have different, there are things that I've found with other cultures that are interesting. So find out if there's any way that you have interpreters or local people that understand a bit more about the cultures of the people you're working with. So I did a talk in Lincoln last year it was, and I met somebody that said, oh, have you come across the barrel people? And I went, yes, I have. A lot of African communities and people who had hoarding, who were from African countries, they wanted to save their stuff and send it back in these old oil barrels that are blue plastic. And there are certain organizations that organize them, and they sent them back, and they said, well, I'll tell you the other side of the barrel story. And so she was saying that somebody had said to her that when they lived in Jamaica, they were clothed from the barrels. And so the barrels were this like wonderful thing in their life that brought them clothes and things from heaven, just sort of the blue barrels turned up. And she said, so that will be carried on through people's thinking and memory. And then they will want those to fill those barrels, but also they might have been fed by them. So, because I'd said to somebody once, well, could you not just send the money? Because by the time you've organised the barrel and paid the guy to send it over to wherever, could you not say? And someone said no. It's the
It's culture.
cachet of the fact that you're filling the barrel and the barrel represents something. And then I understood. So yeah, as much sort of education about other people's views about belongings is important as well. And then you can then use that. So in this particular case, that housing association funded the barrels and it worked. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
Very well. We're coming on to final points. I just saw a point there from Mike which made me laugh. Best advice I've had: in a wet hoard, never disturb anything that has a crust on it. So I quite liked that as a
Don't open fridges.
don't open fridges. So I always ask people, you know, whoever's a guest speaker on the round table, to give their in under a minute kind of where do people start and how do people get going? Because quite often that's where things struggle. So Heather, when you say to people, other than maybe getting hold of yourself, coming in and properly spending some more time with you, how else can people get started on this to really make a difference?
I would find one tenant that just one, because when you start looking at it, you'll be exactly the same as your tenants are. When they look at the whole task, they can't do it. So find one tenant who you think might be amenable to being a pioneer. So you're telling them they're going to help you to help other tenants, and get them on board and see if you can like include them in meetings and include them in like building a pathway that you might develop within your housing association. Then you've got one very motivated and confident tenant, because and also they feel honoured that you've chosen them. So that might override their need to hold on to their stuff because their curiosity's been raised, but also they're going to help others. And that's a real motivator for people. So that would be my advice.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they'd like to follow up after today, Heather?
Email me help@cloudsend.org.uk. So a quick shout out for Hoarding Awareness Week, which is the 3rd week of May. So that might be a way to start as well. You could do something as an organisation to raise awareness. Hoarding Awareness Week. What I'll do is we've got a pack that we give everybody for free with loads of ideas and suggestions in. We do webinars which will be available on Eventbrite during the week, but you can do all sorts of tweeting and even coming up with something within the organization, collection, anything you can do to raise awareness. That would be good. So yes, I'll send you that, but otherwise help@cloudsend.org.uk.
Thank you so much. Next week, a little bit linked, we've got Dr. Hannah Absalom come and talk about psychologically informed approaches. So it ties in, I'm hoping, quite nicely with a lot of what we've discussed today. But just a massive thank you to you, massive thank you to more than 50 guests who've been able to join us today. And I look forward to seeing all of you at a future event, and hopefully people reaching out to yourself, Heather, and Clouds End soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye.